Hi, I'm Vicky. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to be doing some Glad wrap and watercolor Christmas cards. So we're going to make 6. Now you may also know this as Saran wrap, cling wrap, plastic wrap. It's basically just the plastic that you wrap your sandwiches in or cover food bowls with. So we'll be using that. And I'm using the Gansai Tambi Kuretake watercolors. And I have this set, which is quite large. You don't need this. They come in much smaller sizes. There's even a bigger size than this. But one thing I do recommend if you do purchase one of these sets, they have a swatching area in the lid, which tells you the colors, which is quite helpful. However, I love to swatch. Any excuse to swatch, I just love it. I find it extremely relaxing. I used some washi tape, some thin washi tape, gridded all the areas off, and I made these swatches so that I know exactly where the colors lie. So I'll be bringing this into the shot quite a few times when I show you the colors that I'm choosing. I'm using my XL Canson watercolor pad. This is 140 pound or 300 GSM, 9 by 12 inches. And I'm using 3 sheets, and I'm going to cut them in half, which will give me 6 cards, and score them down the middle. So I'm going to cut these down to the 6-inch mark. Now, if you don't have a paper trimmer, you can use scissors and a ruler, and a T-square ruler is great for doing this sort of thing. And now I'm going to score them at the halfway mark. I'm going to 11.5 score. Then you're going to fold. So there's your nice fold line. And the other 2 things I recommend you have are some of this magic eraser, which will help clean up any little bleeds. And I have my QZ tape, which I get from the dollar store for a couple of dollars. And the backing of pad of watercolor paper. And I just want a nice border. Now, if you're using masking tape, test it out before you do this to make sure it won't tear your cards when you pull them off. I just take off some of the tape on my clothing, which works really well too. Now, I don't measure this, I just eyeball it. I don't think it's that important to measure. I'm used to taping down my watercolor paintings this way on a big backing sheet of cardboard, so this will work too. Now really what this is going to do is give me a nice border to my cards, so I'm quite happy with it. I quite like it. I'm going to go around and burnish all the inside edges. All right, so I'm going to have a look at some colours that I think might work well together. Choose 2 colours that will blend well together. So a red and yellow, or a yellow and blue, or a blue and a red. And that's 3 colour choices that will not create mud. Your cadmium red, which is this one, and lemon yellow, which is this one here, and a nice blue. I think we'll go with ultramarine blue, which is this one here. I have a big brush. This is a size 24 Kmart brush. It's a nice cheap one, but it works really, really well for spreading. I'm going to wash down the first card with some water. So this will be wet in wet, which will keep it nice and wet. And you're going to work fast, and you're just going to spread around parts of your card. I want to get right to the corners. And I'm going to use more yellow than blue, otherwise the blue will overtake. So let's see how we go with this one. We're going to clean that off, and now we're coming in with some blue into the wet. And we're getting some nice greens happening there, so that's really good. That's what we want. We want plenty of pigment. Don't want it to be wishy-washy. And that's probably all the mixing you need to do. I'm going to come back and just add a little bit more yellow because the blue is bossier than the yellow. We're going to get our first layer down with our Saran wrap, cling wrap, however you want to say it. Just tear some off. And start at the top and spread it out. I like to use about half and half. So, you know, I use double the amount of cling wrap that is going to be in it. Give it a bit of a smoosh so there's no really flat areas there. You want every area to have some sort of movement in it. And that's that. So that's our first one done. So the next one, do the same again. We're going to start with some wet in wet. So we're going to wet down our paper first. This is an important step. Bring in our yellow. Might do something slightly different this time, sending it sort of like more down the page this way, and then maybe something over here, and maybe something here, so that they don't all look too much the same. And just keeping it nice and loose and quite wet. Now we're bringing in our blue, letting that flood in because it is wet on wet, so it will move around nicely. You can see how it's already created some lovely greens in there. And that's probably about it. I mean, if you see any white paper there, you might want to intensify the colour somewhere here or there, but other than that, it's time for the cling wrap again. So this time I'm going to put the cling wrap on slightly differently, although you get different results every time, so, you know, it can be fun. This time I'm going to do squishing it right into the centre to get different kind of designs, and push with your fingers. And this is much smaller shapes, so this will be more interesting. We've got a lot of small shapes in there, but you don't want to overdo it. Once you feel like you've got some shapes, leave it. So there's our first board done, the yellow and the blue. Now let's do the yellow and the red on the next board. Same deal again. You're going to wet down your paper. You're going to put on your yellow because the yellow is the softer colour, so the reds and the blues will overtake it. So I'm going to do like a Y shape this time, and this time we're doing the red. Let's grab our red and get in there. We're going to have some oranges in here hopefully, and maybe some softer reds. Some paler reds. Get our colours in there, just nothing too fancy. You want to make sure you get right to the edges, corners. And I like to go back and do just a little extra of the yellow just to help it blend a bit better. just around any parts that I feel it needs a little bit more, and just to encourage those orange colours to develop. Okay, and get our Glad Wrap on. And this time I'm going to make the lines go in this direction, if I can. Pull it, shape it, squish it, and then move the paint with your fingers so that it's encouraging the colours to bleed and blend in together. Okay, when that's done, move on to the next one. So we're going to do another yellow and red. Same again. This is wet on wet, so we're going to create a wash of clear water. We're going to start with our yellow, which is the less bossy colour, and try and provide some sort of a different design. I'm kind of going like this. I like this idea. And then maybe have our red in the middle. And a little here, coming down, and a little going up here. This is sort of some shapes like that. Right to the edges, right to the corners. Bring back in some yellow so that we don't get too much red pigment, which will overtake. But I'm mixing in a little bit of yellow into the red to get some oranges happening like that. So that's quite nice, quite like that. And this one I'm just going to kind of do like I did in the first one. I'm going to do it quite big shapes. This one's got big shapes. Make sure you get right into the corners, get a bit of shape on everything, get some patterns happening. Okay, now we're going to go in and do our next one. So now we're using our clear water, which isn't very clear. I've got a bit of yellow on there. Let's get some clear water on there, and let's introduce the red first. I'm going to go up in a diagonal on this one, and maybe a diagonal this way, and then we're going to bring in our blue, and hopefully we're going to get some nice purples mixing in here. So just with our three primary colours, let's see what we can come up with. And a little bit more blue, the edges, and then I'm going to bring back the red again, so that the blue won't completely overtake. So this gives you a chance to get your purples happening, which I like very much. Maybe a little bit of red here. Okay. This one I'm going to do some biggish shapes again. Just laying that down. The thing I love about this is you just don't know what you're going to get till it comes off the paper. So, and one more red and blue. You can see the greens that are developing. You can see there's a little bit of orange in this one, not so much this one. This one hasn't really blended too much, so I want to get more orange in there. You can manipulate it while it's still wet so that you can get more mixing. Okay, so we're starting off with our red. Kind of more like sideways. Oh, we forgot to put our water on. Get our water on. There we go, that helps it move around. And giving it a bit wet. This edge here, maybe up to the top. Then bring in the blue. Oh, look at that lovely colour spreading. Beautiful. Now you could use more than 3 colours if you're feeling adventurous. I'm just doing these because I want to show you how many variations you can get just with 2 colours. It's pretty special. And I want to bring in a bit more red to compensate for all that blue that's going on, and maybe get some purple happening in here. Okay, and here's our next one. And this one I'm going to do something like I did on the first one, which was like layering in lines, so we get some lines coming in. You can lay down some lines, which is kind of cool too. I like the lines. I think they give a really graphic pattern, which I like. I like the graphic. Okay, and smooth them out so that you get more line shapes in this one. So you've got something that's more moving in that direction. And you can move them a few more around. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so give them all a good press down so that you're getting good contact with your paper, and out of those 3 primary colours. Now the hardest part of this whole exercise is leaving this to dry overnight. If you feel you want a few more lines in as it's drying, you can check it. You can add a few more here and there, so you've got a few more little designs in it. This one I don't think has quite enough blue on it. It's still wet, so I'm going to bring in some more blue. This one just doesn't have enough blue, so I'm going to add a bit more. Some at the top. The yellow has kind of taken over on this one. There we go. So while it's still wet, you can still manipulate, push it back down again. And that's going to make it more interesting, I do think. Put a little bit more blue in there, a little bit more up there. Okay. You can see where I didn't wet the paper here. That's going to be a strong bit of yellow, a strong bit of red, so that's good. This bit, I'm looking at it thinking it needs a little bit more blue in the corner there too. This one needs a little bit more blue in there. You can see the red's really overtaken on this one. So if you see this happening, just lift it up, add more of the colour that you want, or mix them together a bit more, and then press it back down again, all while it's still wet. This one doesn't have a whole lot of blue in it. The blue doesn't really want to play. It's ultramarine blue. It should be playing better than that, but anyway, we shall see. All right, so I'm going to leave these to dry overnight, and I'll get back to you. So you do need to leave it overnight. You need to give the paint a chance to dry completely, so that it doesn't pull up with the plastic wrap. So let's do the reveal and see what we have. Wow, oh yum. So here's our first 2, let's have a look. Look at the textures it creates, it's just amazing. And once we do the tape reveal, you'll be even more astonished. Okay, let's have a look at our red and blues and purples. Oh, so pretty. And let's do our yellows, reds and oranges. So there they are. Let's do the reveal. You need to go slow and low with your tape. Hold it low to the table and take it slow. I'm going to bring in my Chuck's Magic Eraser in case any of the paint has bled underneath the masking tape. Looking pretty good so far. Adding this border to the edge makes your card look really professional. And it's something I love to do with all my watercolour paintings, is to tape the edges. So doing it to cards as well makes them look really good, really well finished. And it looks as though there hasn't been any paint bleed under this one at all, so that's great. Fingers crossed. There's the first one. I'm so happy with that. I think that looks so interesting. I can use my magic eraser on just a little bit there. So to do that, I'll need to wet it down with a little bit of water, squeeze the excess water out, and then I can dab it into just those tiny little parts that have bled. It's only very small. You may feel you don't need to do this with yours. So there's a bit of water in a bowl, squeeze it out, and just dab it. Doesn't take much really, and it comes off quite easily. You can see there's a little bit of yellow staining that now where the yellow has come off. And this is exactly how I would clean up my large paintings as well, if any of the paint bleeds under the tape. I'm going to pop some music on while I do the rest. think all 6 of these cards look fabulous exactly as they are. There are different ways that you could decorate them though. If you wanted to put a message on the inside of the card, you can. If you wanted to stamp an image on the outside, I think a good way to do that would be with some cream embossing powder, because that would really match the frame that's around it. Black might get lost on the red and blue in particular. So I'm going to do all of the greetings on the inside of the cards. I'm using some very old stamp sets from Stampin' Up! And one stamp set from Close to My Heart. If you are not a stamper and don't use stamps, you could write a greeting on the inside of the cards, And they don't necessarily need to be Christmas cards. They could be just general greeting cards, or you could keep them blank until you need them. But I wanted to show you how to stamp on watercolor paper because it can be a little tricky. That's why I'm using a stamp positioner instead of just putting my stamps on an acrylic block. I also like to use Versafine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigment ink that is waterproof when it's dry. You could even draw a botanical on the front of your card with a black Sharpie if you like to draw flowers. That would be nice as a decoration for the front. But I will be showing you how I stamp a Christmas greeting inside each of these cards. And some of the cards will be landscape and some will be portrait orientation. And here's the last card finished. You may have seen one of my earlier videos where I demonstrated how I made this card, and how I added the finishing touch was with a die cut from the same Canson watercolor paper. So that's an idea too. If you had a Christmas greeting and you cut it in Canson watercolor paper, that would work beautifully on the front of your card. And the finishing touch, I believe, is the envelope. Now, I love to collect coloured envelopes. I get these from Officeworks in Australia. They're by Quill, and I think they have several different varieties. You can find these in any store that sells stationery pretty much. And I managed to find a different envelope colour for each of my cards, so I couldn't be happier. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, do so you won't miss any more videos. Bye for now.